Let's travel back to 480 BC. The massive Persian Empire, led by King Xerxes, is on the march. His army is colossal, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. His goal? To conquer all of Greece. The Greek city-states are terrified, and many are surrendering without a fight. But not all of them. A small alliance of Greek states decides to make a stand. Their plan is to block the Persian advance at a narrow coastal pass called Thermopylae, which means the hot gates. It's a brilliant strategic choice. The pass is so narrow that the Persians' overwhelming numbers would count for nothing. Here, a small force could potentially hold off a giant army. But who would be brave enough to face such impossible odds? Enter King Leonidas of Sparta. The Spartans were the most feared warriors in the ancient world. From the age of 7, every male citizen was trained for one thing and one thing only: war. They lived a brutal, disciplined life designed to create the perfect soldier. When the call came, Leonidas knew he had to go. However, due to a religious festival, the full Spartan army couldn't be deployed. So Leonidas did something incredible. He handpicked 300 of his best soldiers, his personal royal guard. Each man was a veteran, and crucially, each had a son to carry on his family line. They knew this was a suicide mission. When Leonidas and his 300 Spartans arrived at Thermopylae, they were joined by a few thousand other Greek soldiers from different cities. Altogether, they were about 7,000 strong. Facing them was Xerxes' army, a force so large it was said to drink rivers dry. Xerxes was so confident that he sent a messenger to the Greeks demanding they lay down their weapons. Leonidas' famous reply? Molenlebe, which means come and get them. The battle was on. For 2 straight days, the Greeks held the pass. The Spartans stood at the front, a wall of bronze and muscle. Their long spears and large shields were devastatingly effective in the narrow space. Wave after wave of Persian infantry, including their elite unit, the Immortals, were thrown against the Greek line, and wave after wave were cut down. The sheer discipline and fighting skill of the Spartans were unlike anything the Persians had ever seen. The legend of their invincibility was being forged in blood and steel. Xerxes, watching from his throne, is said to have leaped to his feet in frustration and fear multiple times as his best troops were slaughtered. The Greeks were holding the impossible line, but their heroic stand was about to be undone by betrayal. A local Greek man named Ephialtes, hoping for a rich reward from Xerxes, revealed a secret mountain path that went around the Greek position. This path would allow the Persians to encircle the Greeks and attack them from behind. When Leonidas learned of the betrayal, he knew the battle was lost. His position was now indefensible. He made a critical decision. He ordered the majority of the Greek army to retreat, saving thousands of lives so they could fight another day. But he and his 300 Spartans would stay. They would hold the pass to the last man to delay the Persians and protect the retreating Greek forces. A small contingent of Thespian and Theban soldiers chose to stay with them, inspired by their bravery. They were now facing the entire Persian army, surrounded and with no hope of survival. What followed was not a battle, but a last stand for the ages. The Spartans fought with a fury born of desperation and honor. When their spears broke, they fought with their short swords. When their swords shattered, they fought with their hands and teeth. They were completely surrounded, arrows raining down on them so thick they were said to blot out the sun. The Spartans' response? Then we will fight in the shade. Eventually, one by one, they fell. Leonidas was killed, and a fierce fight erupted over his body. The surviving Greeks fought to the last, making the Persians pay dearly for every inch of ground. In the end, all 300 Spartans, along with their brave allies, lay dead. They had lost the battle, but their sacrifice was not in vain. Their incredible stand at Thermopylae bought the rest of Greece precious time. It allowed the city of Athens to be evacuated and for the Greek navy to prepare for a decisive battle at sea. The story of the 300 Spartans ignited a fire of resistance across Greece. It showed that the mighty Persians were not gods, that they could be beaten. Athens was burning. Flames climbed into the night sky. Smoke rolled over the Acropolis. The sound of cracking wood and falling stone echoed through empty streets. The people had already fled. Themistocles, the Athenian leader, had made a bold decision. He told his people to abandon their city and trust in something new. Not walls, not land, but ships. While Sparta had chosen to stand on land at Thermopylae, Athens chose the sea. The Persian army marched into the empty city. Xerxes watched as his soldiers set it on fire. The temples burned. The sacred places turned to ash. To Xerxes, this was proof. Greece was broken. The stand of the 300 had not stopped him. It had only delayed him. But what Xerxes did not understand was that the Greeks were changing their strategy. Thermopylae was never meant to be the final stand. It was the opening move. And now, everything depended on the sea. Far from the smoke of Athens, hundreds of Greek ships gathered near a narrow strait called Salamis. Themistocles believed this was the perfect trap. The strait was tight and rocky. Large numbers would not matter there, just like Thermopylae. But the Greeks were divided again. Some leaders wanted to retreat farther south. Some wanted to protect their own cities. Fear spread among them. Themistocles knew something dangerous. If they sailed away, Persia would win. If they stayed united, they had a chance. So he made a risky move. According to ancient sources, he sent a secret message to Xerxes. He told the Persian king that the Greeks were planning to escape. He encouraged Xerxes to attack immediately. Why? Because Themistocles wanted the Persian navy to enter the narrow strait. He wanted them trapped. Was this message real? Most historians believe it was. But we cannot know every detail. What we do know is this: Xerxes took the bait. The Persian fleet moved into the tight waters of Salamis. And suddenly, their size became a weakness. Ships crashed into one another. Or snapped. Confusion spread. Greek ships, smaller and more agile, rammed into Persian vessels. The battle turned chaotic. From a hilltop, Xerxes watched the disaster unfold. The empire that had seemed unstoppable was now trapped by geography, by strategy, by unity, at least for that moment. The Persian navy suffered heavy losses. Xerxes realized something shocking. If his fleet was destroyed, his massive land army could not be supplied. He had to retreat. He left part of his army behind under General Mardonius. But he himself returned to Persia. This was not the image of total victory he had imagined. The fire of Athens had not ended Greece. It had hardened it. But here is the part that makes the story even more complex. Sparta had not led the naval victory. Athens had. The city that lost everything in flames became the city that saved Greece at sea. And that created tension. After Thermopylae, Sparta had the legend. After Salamis, Athens had the power. The next year, in 479 BCE, the final major battle of the invasion took place at Plataea. This time, Sparta did send a large army. The Greeks were fully united. The Persian forces left behind were defeated. The invasion ended. Greece was free, but freedom came with a cost. The story of the 300 Spartans became famous across Greece. It was told as a tale of pure bravery, of men who chose death over surrender. And yes, that courage was real. But the full picture is more complicated. Sparta had hesitated before Thermopylae. Sparta had followed religious tradition instead of sending full support. And Sparta later used the legend of the 300 to strengthen its image as Greece's greatest warrior state. Meanwhile, Athens rose in power. It built a naval empire. It formed the Delian League. At first, this alliance was meant to protect against Persia. But slowly, Athens began to control its allies, demanding money, demanding loyalty. The unity that had saved Greece began to crack. And then something tragic happened. The Greek city-states turned on each other. The Peloponnesian War began. Sparta versus Athens. Former allies became enemies. The same bravery shown at Thermopylae now faced fellow Greeks. Years of war weakened both sides. And in the end, neither Sparta nor Athens would dominate forever. Because far to the north, another power was rising. Macedon, led by Philip II, and later, his son, Alexander the Great. The world changed again. But the legend of the 300 did not fade. It grew. Poets told the story. Statues were built. The message was simple. Stand firm. Fight together. Choose honor. Yet modern historians still ask hard questions. How accurate were the numbers? Ancient writers like Herodotus described millions in the Persian army. Modern research suggests far fewer, though still overwhelming compared to the Greeks. Were there truly exactly 300 Spartans? Yes, 300 were chosen by Leonidas. But thousands of other Greeks stood with them. The Thespians, especially, stayed until the end. Yet their story is often forgotten. Why? Because the number 300 is powerful. It is simple. It is memorable. It fits into legend. History is often shaped by what people choose to remember and what they choose to leave out. Thermopylae was a defeat, but it became a symbol of resistance. Salamis was a victory, but it is less famous in popular culture. Why does one story shine brighter? Because sacrifice touches something deep inside us. Because the image of a small force standing against a giant empire feels timeless. But here is the deeper truth. The survival of Greece was not because of one battle. It was because of many choices. Some brave, some political, some desperate. If the Greek navy had failed at Salamis, Thermopylae would have been just a tragic story. If Sparta and Athens had not united again at Plataea, Persia might have returned stronger. History is fragile. It hangs on moments, on narrow passes, on tight straits, on secret messages, and on human decisions. Leonidas became a symbol. Xerxes became a warning. But the invasion of Greece teaches something greater. No empire is unstoppable. No city is invincible. And unity can change the course of history. Still, one mystery remains. After Xerxes retreated, Persia did not disappear. It remained powerful for decades. It influenced Greek politics. It funded rivals. It played both sides quietly. The war was not just swords and ships. It was also diplomacy, money, strategy. So when we speak of the 300 Spartans, we must remember they were part of a much larger story. A story of fear, of pride, of leadership, of survival. And yet, even now, historians debate details. Was Leonidas fully aware of the betrayal before the final morning? Did he choose death as a political message? Did Sparta calculate that sacrifice would inspire all Greece? We may never know every answer. But we do know this. The stand at Thermopylae was not the end. It was the spark. The fire that followed reshaped the ancient world. And without that fire, there would be no golden age of Athens, no Parthenon, no philosophers like Socrates, no stage for Alexander to conquer. The truth behind the 300 is not smaller than the legend. It is larger. It is more human, more complicated, more powerful. But there is one final layer to uncover. Because centuries later, the story of the 300 would be used again, by different nations, for different reasons, and sometimes, not always truthfully. To understand that part, we must look at how memory becomes myth, and how myth becomes power, and that is where our story now turns. When legend becomes power centuries past, the bones at Thermopylae turned to dust. The mountains stayed silent. But the story of the 300 did not die. It traveled. It changed. It grew. Long after Sparta itself faded from power, people still spoke the name of Leonidas. Why? Because the story was simple. A small group stood against a giant empire. Courage against fear. Honor against surrender. But history is never just a story. It is also a tool. And tools can be used in many ways. After the Persian Wars, Greece entered a golden age. Athens built the Parthenon. Art, philosophy, science, all flourished. Yet the unity that saved Greece did not last. Sparta and Athens went to war. The Peloponnesian War lasted nearly 30 years. Cities were destroyed. People starved. Allies betrayed one another. In the end, Sparta won that war. But victory did not bring peace. Sparta's power weakened over time. Its strict system could not adapt. Its population shrank. Its influence faded. By the time Alexander the Great rose to power in the north, Sparta was no longer the unstoppable force it once claimed to be. And yet, the legend of the 300 remained strong. Roman writers admired it. Later European scholars studied it. The story became a symbol of bravery in military schools. But something subtle happened. Over time, the legend grew larger than the facts. The number 300 became the center of everything. The thousands of other Greek soldiers were mentioned less and less. The political debates before the battle were forgotten. The delays caused by religious festivals were rarely discussed. The naval victory at Salamis was pushed into the background. The sacrifice became the main message. And sacrifice is powerful. In different eras, leaders used the story to inspire soldiers, to encourage loyalty, to teach discipline. The image of a small force resisting a massive enemy can stir deep emotions. But when a story becomes a symbol, details can fade. For example, ancient sources like Herodotus gave us most of what we know. He wrote decades after the battle. He collected stories from survivors. He recorded speeches that no one could fully verify. Modern historians compare his work with archaeology and other texts. They question numbers. They debate motives. They look for balance. Because history is not meant to be worshipped. It is meant to be understood. Thermopylae was real. Leonidas was real. Xerxes was real. The invasion happened. The battle happened. But the way we imagine it today is shaped by centuries of retelling. Think about this. If the Greeks had lost at Salamis, if Plataea had ended differently, Thermopylae might be remembered as a tragic mistake, not a heroic stand. Victory later gave meaning to sacrifice earlier. That is an important truth. The 300 Spartans did not save Greece alone. They bought time. They inspired unity. They became a rallying cry. But they were part of a chain of events. A chain that included strategy, politics, sea battles, alliances, and risk. The real power of the story is not that 300 men fought bravely. It is that their stand became a turning point in morale, in belief, in identity. For the Greeks, it proved something. The Persian Empire, though vast, could be resisted. Size did not guarantee victory. Discipline and strategy mattered. And unity mattered even more. But there is one final question. Why does this story still matter today? Because it speaks to something timeless. Small against large. Few against many. Choice against fear. Yet if we only see the myth, we miss the deeper lesson. The deeper lesson is not about dying in battle. It is about preparation. It is about cooperation. It is about hard decisions made under pressure. Leonidas chose to stay when retreat was possible. Themistocles chose to fight at sea when others doubted. Greek city-states chose unity when division would have been easier. Those choices changed history. And here is the quiet truth behind the legend. The 300 Spartans were not invincible heroes. They were trained soldiers following orders. They felt fear. They faced uncertainty. They stood in a narrow pass, knowing the odds. Their strength was not magic. It was discipline, training, commitment. When we remove exaggeration, the story does not become weaker. It becomes stronger. Because real courage is more powerful than fantasy. The mountains of Thermopylae still stand today. The pass is wider now than it was in ancient times. The sea has shifted. The landscape has changed. But visitors still come. They read the inscription that honors the fallen. It says that the Spartans obeyed their laws and stood firm. Simple words, heavy meaning. The truth behind the 300 Spartans is not that they defeated an empire. They did not. The truth is that their stand became a symbol that helped shape the identity of a civilization. And that civilization went on to influence the world. Greek ideas traveled to Rome. Roman ideas shaped Europe. And through centuries of change, the story of Thermopylae remained. But when we tell it, we must remember every layer. The bravery, the politics, the mistakes, the strategy, the unity, the cost. History is not a single moment frozen in time. It is a chain reaction. And Thermopylae was one link in that chain. A powerful link. A painful link. A human link. So when someone says, only 300 Spartans stood against the Persian Empire, you now know the deeper truth. They were not alone. They were not the final victory. They were not a perfect myth. They were part of a larger struggle that reshaped the ancient world. And that is what makes the real story even more powerful than the legend. Because behind every myth, there are real people, real choices, real consequences. And sometimes, the truth is braver than the story we tell. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe for more historical documentary.